Okay. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Yeah. So tonight you'll see Nick Principe on your screen. He lives here in Myrtle Beach. He spends a lot of time in Assisi. He began going to India back in the 70s. He has many wonderful stories in being with the Mandali, the men and women Mandali. And he was especially close with Baba's family in Pune. Bob's brother Jal. I don't know if you were Baron was still alive, but he was very close with Sorab and Rustam Baba's twin nephews. In fact, Mani used to call him the third nephew, the third twin. Pardon me, and he uh, he spent a lot of time with Jal, who one of his great things was telling when Baba would go through these seclusions and when he got to the end and he was so exhausted and from fasting and seclusion work, he would call Jal to come and share jokes with him. And Jal had a whole repertoire of jokes, and Nick has some great jokes as well. I'm hoping we can extract some from him. But I'm going to let him go ahead uh, and go. Yeah. So Nick,
Yes.
I don't know if there's anything more to say.
Pardon me, my voice. Am I okay? Can everybody hear me?
Fine here for me.
Okay. All right. Okay. So, and I don't mind if anybody wants to stop me at any point, either for a question or some comment. Just bear in mind, if you do that, you're probably going to have to lead my hand back to where the conversation was, because now I've reached that age where my memory is, I don't chase it anymore because I never catch it. Um, but actually, it's my pleasure. Um, Baba, I'm going to ask Baba uh, to please just speak through me, whatever it is that I can convey. Jeff, when he mentioned this to me and he asked me if I would tell a joke, something I heard from the Mandali, it really caused me to think that, it was easy to remember some of the jokes, but what I really began to think about is how Baba wanted humor because he said it eased his suffering. And uh, and I, it was one of the ways that he would be entertained. Singing, of course, would entertain him, but he always wanted jokes. And in the early days, the Mandali would remind us, they said, practice, learn a joke that you can tell Baba. So if you have the chance to be with him in the future, if he asks you for a joke, you'll have one to tell him. So I will tell you the one that I've saved. I've practiced it for 30 years. This is my joke for Baba, but I'm going to save it for a little bit because there are some other thoughts that came to me. The first, as Jeff mentioned, Jal was really, for those of you who got a chance to know him, Baba's brother, his younger brother, he was absolutely full of a constant stream of jokes. But he told me one time how that started with him. He said that this was in Manzil Mim days, and Baba had given them orders that wherever he was going, if he just got up in the middle of the night and walked out, left the building where he was, the Mandali were just to go with him. No questions. They just got up, got dressed that they needed to, and out the door. No tea, nothing. And oftentimes Baba would do this, especially if he heard there was a must or a saint or somebody that he wanted to make contact with. So John told me this one day. He said he was a youngster. He was a teenager because Baba during Manzili Mim, let me see, he was born 1894. He was Manzili Mim 22, 1922. So he was, not even 30 years old. He was a youngster himself. And of course, not known by Meher Baba then. He was, the family called him Merog, Merog. So he got up, Baba got up in the middle of the night and quickly out the door of Manzili Mim, the Mandali rushed those that were with him, Adi, Padri, Pendu, Jal. There might have been a few others, but those are the ones I remember. And he said that it was dark. It might have been 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And Baba just started walking. And they all followed behind. But they were grumbling. The men were grumbling. There was no tea. They had no chance even to go to the toilet to relieve themselves because when Baba said come, they had to go. There are stories, I'm sure you've heard, where they might have been in the middle of relieving themselves and Baba sent for them. They would have to just quickly pull up the trousers and go. So they're walking. Baba's walking ahead. The Mandali are dragging along behind. And after a while, Baba calls Jal alongside him as they're walking. And he said, he said, Jal, everybody's grumbling. You need to brighten the mood. You need to cheer everybody up. So I want you to tell a joke. He said, Jal said, Baba, I have no, he was a teenager. He was 18, 19 years old. He'd never been out of Pune. He had no experience with anything like that. No television, of course. Who do you learn jokes from? Well, he wasn't hanging around going to clubs and bars or wherever people, playing cards with men. So Baba said, never mind. You come up with something. So John's thinking. He said, then after a few minutes, Baba's still walking ahead. And John says, it calls out to him. He said, brother, Merog. Baba turns around. He said, yes. What is it? He said, I have a confession to make. And Baba says, is it important? He said, yes, Baba. He said, this is very important. I must confess. I broke your order. Baba, now it's a serious matter that one of the Mandali has broken Baba's order. So Baba now has an excuse to stop. And of course, all the men now are happy because they're gathering around. They're not thinking of their own discomfort and missing tea. Now they're getting to hear this whatever news is. And Baba tells him, he said, okay, well, how is it? What is it that you mean you did something terrible? He said, well, Baba, he said, I committed a theft. He said, I stole something. I looked at him. He said, you're my brother and you're stealing? He said, how is that possible? Why have you done this? Explain this to me. And Jal said, Baba, he said, I had to. Otherwise, if I didn't commit this crime, I would have broken your order. And you had given me an order. And it led to me stealing. And Baba said, I didn't give you an order to steal. He said, no, Baba. No, Merag. He said, but you remember, he said, when I wasn't feeling well days ago, and you told me to go to the doctor. He said, yes, I remember. He said, the doctor gave me some medicine. He said, yes, I remember. And he said, then afterwards, he said, we stopped for tea. Baba said, yes, I remember. He said, so what does that got to do with it? I don't see the connection. He said, Baba, he said, I stole 2 spoons from the tea shop. And he said, how is that? He said, but Baba, you told me I have to obey the doctor. And he said, yes, but what's that got to do with it? He said, the doctor told me I should take 2 spoons after tea. So then everybody laughed and Baba. So this was the innocence of the kind of teasing and the jokes that they would have. And Jal, for those of you who didn't know, he was quite a character. He was I referred to him as Baba's bag man. You know, when Baba was collecting money for tours or whatever he was going to do from the Easterners, he would send Jal. And Jal would go just get on the train and go with a suitcase and go to Andhra or wherever it was that Baba would send them to. And they would get a suitcase full of rupees and bring back to Baba. And he was just, his obedience and his love for his brother was something to watch. But all of the Mandali, I think, had this sense of, I would say, playfulness. Alaba was in the States one time, and during that visit, must be about 30 years ago when he was here, he stayed with me. I was living in Chapel Hill at the time. And he had been at the center first, so I drove down from North Carolina to come pick him up, drove him back to stay with us in Chapel Hill. And when we picked him up, he was found out that he was horribly constipated because, and he told us very bluntly, he said people were feeding him, taking him to Kentucky Fried Chicken, place like that. He had no home cooked food. He had nothing. So we took the best care of him that we could. Chicken soup with tiny diced vegetables. After the second day, we heard him in the bathroom shouting at the top of his lungs, Jai Baba, Jai Baba. Well, of course, we knew that then he came out smiling, and we knew that our care had worked its miracle on him. Now, it was about a month after he was there that Bao came to visit, and Bao stayed with us in Chapel Hill. And Bao, of course, wanted to know all the details about Alaba's visit. And because Alaba was, for those who didn't know him, he was the longest of all the members of the Mandali with Baba, except for Jal. He was the longest because he had been with Baba since he was a child in the school. So here he was from that time in the very, very early days until his passing. So he was with Baba a very long time. But for those who didn't know him, he was a force to be reckoned with. Very difficult to get to know. But his one pointed focus on Baba was just something to behold. As a matter of fact, a little aside, even when they were in Mandali Hall, Baba would make him wear sunglasses because he would sit and stare at Baba so much that it would distract Baba. Baba had him wear sunglasses. He was the only one. So he would wear sunglasses so Baba didn't have to look at his eyes. But so when Bao was there, he wanted to know about how everybody liked Alaba's visit. And of course, I had to tell him about him shouting in the toilet. Well, later that year, I went off to India, and here was Pendu and Erich and Bao sitting by the blue bus. And Alaba was wandering around. And of course, Bao insisted that I tell Pendu the story about Alaba, and I had to be dramatic with it. He wanted to shout, he wanted all of this. And Pendu and Eretz, they were just giggling like schoolboys. That was their sense of humor was they teased each other mercilessly. And for those of us who, it's one of the things that I treasure is the intimacy, because they really did live like brothers and sisters. To me, it lets me recognize my own shortcomings about how difficult it is for me to want to draw other people like brothers and sisters. It makes me think about how much there is to do. And I want to go back to Jal for a few minutes because he was such a character. um, Baba one time wanted Margaret Krask, and this story is published. Baba wanted Margaret, so he told Jal, he said, go get Margaret immediately. Jal went, delivered the message to Margaret Krask. After he went back, after a bit, Baba said, where's Margaret? She hadn't come. And Jal said, Baba, I gave her the message. And Baba said, go tell her again. And he went back maybe even 3 times. He went back with the same message. Margaret never responded. Finally, Baba sent somebody else. He said, tell her to come now, immediately. And she came. And Baba said, why didn't you come when I sent Jal to tell you to come? She said, Baba, Jal is always joking. So I thought that he was joking. I thought he was teasing. I didn't take him seriously. Baba said, he said, Jal will joke about the entire universe, but he will never joke about me. Baba, his sense of humor, his own sense of humor would come out sometimes. There's a wonderful story about Princess Narina Machiavelli. Baba was in Europe, I guess, in the 30s, maybe in staying at Kitty's parents' house. And Norina, of course, traveled in very artistic circles. She was, married to a prince, so she was a princess by marriage and traveled in those circles. And she, of course, wanted to bring her friends to meet Baba. And there's one friend agreed to go meet Baba, but not saying anything to Norina. This woman, in her mind, she didn't say anything to anybody, but in her mind, she said that she decided she was going to judge the avatar, this person claiming to be a spiritual master in those days. She was going to judge him on his taste in music because she liked classical music, and she thought that only classical music was the kind of music that a spiritually enlightened person would listen to. She brought into the room. Norina introduces her to Baba. Baba greets her. They chat for a minute. And then Baba turns and says to her, would you like some music? I like music. Would you like some music? And she said, oh, yes, that would be very nice. And Baba has them put on La Cucaracha by Carmen Miranda. For those of you who don't know that song, Carmen Miranda was, I guess, Latina. And it was, when I was a little boy, it was popular. La Cucaracha, it's the cockroach, is what cucaracha means. And this woman turned around and walked out because she decided Baba could not be a master because he didn't listen to classical music. So Baba himself, was the jokester. The jokester, yeah. Baba also when they were playing, there would be stories the Mandali would tell. And when they were in Guru Prasad, pardon me, and Baba would it want everything light, so there was always music. His nephews, the twins, had to go entertain him. They were just teenagers at the time. And they play cards, they play checkers. And if you've seen photos of this, you see it was very hot. Baba's just in his shorts. He might have his sadra pulled up, just his legs exposed with a pair of like pajama shorts underneath, and it's perspiring, and because it was hot in Pune. And but the watchman came one time. They were sitting there playing cards, and the watchman came and said, "Baba, so and so has come to see you with his family." And Baba said, "Oh, just," and he told everybody to take the cards and sit on them. And Baba told them to meditate. So here the Mandali now are sitting there all in their respective places with their eyes closed and their hands folded. And this person came in, greeted Baba. Baba, of course, asked about health and how they were and the family and all of those things. And they were very happy, and they left. And then Baba just told them, "Okay, now get the cards out." And when somebody asked him, I don't know if it was Jal or somebody asked him, they said, "Baba, why that?" He said, "Because his faith would have been shaken if he would have seen me playing cards." He said, in his mind, you should all be meditating and in prayer. And I should be, the focus of your meditation. And now take the cards out. We'll go back and play cards. So Baba was always aware, he is always aware of what we expect and want from him. And in our youth and inexperience, we have this idea of what something spiritual should be. I mean, I certainly thought that. When I first went to India in the 70s, I was a fruitarian. I was skinny as a rail, and I lived on fruit and water and milk. And I stayed at the center for 2 weeks, scoffing at everybody who was eating meat or hamburgers or chicken, laughing and being just an insufferable SOB. And off I go to India. And my wife at the time, we had just had let's just say she was anemic from some health problems. And Dr. Goer told her she needed to eat organ meats, liver and things like that. And she told Dr. Goer, she said, "Dr. Goer, Nick, I can't cook that in the house. Nick wouldn't let me cook that in the house." Dr. Goer turned to me and she said, "You will not only cook for her, you're going to eat with her." So here now we come back from India, and here I'm back at the center for another week or 10 days. And here I am in the kitchen fixing liver and onions, having to face the same people who a few months before I was telling them how wrong it was to be eating meat and eating, how terrible it was. And here I am now, liver and onions. I I can honestly say that now that I've reached this age, I'll be 80 on my next birthday, that if it wasn't for a sense of humor, I would not have survived. I think a sense of humor, as a matter of fact, I would say that as we age, all of our senses diminish: the sense of vision, sense of taste, sense of hearing, sense of touch. The only sense that can get better is the sense of humor. And I thank God, I thank Baba for that gift to be able to laugh at myself and laugh at the world. I look now and I think how silly it is. There are things that are going on. Yes, suffering is terrible. Um, but for whatever reason, it's what he's doing. It's what he wants. I just came to the conclusion he's either in charge or not. I can't say he's in charge part of the time, and then part of the time I can't accept what he says. I either have to accept him or I'll go find somebody else. You know, you go to a doctor, you go to an attorney. If you don't trust your doctor, go find another doctor. You can't sit there and question everything that your doctor tells you to do. If you feel that way, find somebody that you trust. That's how I am with my relationship with Meher Baba. I've learned to trust him. I continue to ask him to allow me to trust him more. And one of the things that he's blessed me with is this sense of humor that I can laugh at myself and laugh at life.
Hey, Nick.
Baba's sense of humor. There was a story that Erich told one time about Chanji. Baba wanted him to go to uh, Bombay on some business. And this was, of course, very early days at Mehrabad. And Chanji, of course, was fine with going. He said, but Baba, he said, and it was some business matter. You didn't see a court or attorneys or something. And he said, well, Baba, and Baba was at the time shaving the musts and doing haircuts. And for those of you who haven't seen it, what they used to use is an old style brass clipper that you would squeeze the two handles, and it had cutting blades that would go across. And I remember these in the States when I was a little boy. They use them in India. I think they still use them. And they pass this over the head and they're clipping it and put there. So Baba's there with the musts and he's doing haircuts and bathing them. And Chanji comes over and says he's going to go. And he said, but Baba, I'm going to have to go stop someplace to get a haircut. And Baba says, really? And Baba reaches over and takes his clipper and one side of his head. He said, now you're fine. Now go ahead and go. And
Oh.
and he said, Baba, you want people to see me like this? I don't mind if that's what you want. But that's Baba sent him off that way, just clipping one side of his head. That was it. So the joke that I've saved for Baba, and this is comes from the Catholic or Christian tradition. So I hope everybody is going to get it. If not, I'll explain it afterwards. So the Pope hears that there's a monk living on a hillside in Italy, and people are calling him a saint. Now, the Pope is very concerned about that because nobody should be called a saint while they're alive. So the Pope gathers his entourage. They go on donkey back and they're asking the locals. And sure enough, you get directed up on this lone mountain. There's one like a little 2-room cabin. There are some flowers, some grapevines outside, a few tomatoes, little tiny little garden. The Pope dismounts, knocks on the door, and this little old monk answers the door. Looks at the Pope. He says, "Oh my Holy Father, am I dreaming?" He said, Is it really you? Are you really the Pope?" And he says, "Yes, my son." He said, "Well, Holy Father, I must be, why? Why?" He said, "Well, my son," he said, "may I come in?" And Monk says, "Of course, Holy Father, please come in." Brings him into his little cabin. The Pope looks around. There's a table and a couple of chairs, and a few cooking utensils, and there's another room off to the side. And Pope says, "My son," he said, people are saying that you're a saint. Is it true that you're a saint?" The monk says, "Holy Father, I have no idea about that." He said, I don't know what people say about me. I don't call myself a saint. I don't know what anybody else says. The Pope says, "Well, what do you hear when you go in town?" He said, "Well, Holy Father, I don't go anyplace." He said, "Well, what do you mean you don't go anyplace? Don't you leave the mountain to go get food and what you need?" He said, "No, Holy Father." He said, "I haven't left this mountain for maybe 7, 8 years. I've been here now, maybe longer. I lost track of time." And the Pope says, "Well, it's amazing. How do you survive?" He said, "Well, I grow some grapes, and I have some fruit, and I have a small vegetable garden, and some of the local village boys, they bring me some milk and cheese from their goats." The Pope's thinking, maybe there's something to this. Maybe this man really is kind of a saintly person. He said, "Well, how do you spend your time?" He said, "Oh, Holy Father," he said, "I spend my time in prayer and meditation." And the Pope's thinking, wow, like all day prayer meditation. What you must have some entertainment. He said, "Well, Holy Father, my entertainment," he said, "I do make some wine, and I have my rosary. That's my entertainment." And he said, "Is it okay that I have wine, Holy Father?" The Pope says, "Yes, my son. As a matter of fact, Lord Jesus gave his disciples wine." The monk said, "Oh, that's good." He said, "Would you like some wine, Holy Father?" He said, "Yes, yes, I would." "Rosary, bring us some wine." So any man can be a saint as long as he's got his rosary and some wine.
Very good.
Uh, I don't know if there's, if you, I mean, I'm happy to share. I don't know that I have much more to say about the jokes and humor. If Jeff, there's anything else, if anybody's got any questions about any of the particular Mandali, I'll be happy to share my experiences with them. Bao stayed with me, I don't know, 8 or 9 times over the years that he came to the States. Uh, Alaba was with me. Many of the Mandali were in my home in Chapel Hill. Uh, so,
Nick, this is Gail Merrill. You know me from the Chapel Hill group. Jay Baba,
Hi.
how are you?
I'm fine.
It's great to see you. That's exactly what I was going to ask is you entertained so many of the Mandali in your own home. Why don't you tell a couple of stories about, about something that comes to mind? I don't know, anything. Great to see you.
Yeah, any
nice to see
exchanges
you.
with the Mandali.
Yeah, a couple of things. The Mandali, the way the house was laid out, uh, there was a large living room. The kitchen was open, and whenever there was, rarely did any of the Mandali give a private interview, but occasionally there would be somebody that would ask Bao because of some problems they were having, and Bao would consent. And he would chat with them in the living room, and here I am in the kitchen 10, 12 feet away, so I was able to hear what was going on. And I'm sure this particular episode that I remember was because it of the story that I'm about to tell. And Bao told me afterwards that this story and a couple of other stories, he said they're very important and I should tell them to as many people as I can whenever I could. So this fellow's they're sitting on the couch, and the fellow is explaining to Bao that he just was having this problem with this person, whatever it was. I don't remember. That's not important. And Bao kept asking him. He said, "Well, why did you do it this way? Why didn't you do it that way?" And the fellow just kept trying to strengthen his reasons for why he did what he did. He didn't at any point uh, look like he was even receptive at all to what Bao was saying. You know, Bao was giving him alternatives that he could have done, which now it was too late, of course, but you know, you file that away and maybe you use that again if that same circumstance happens later. But anyway, this fellow was just very close-minded, and he left. And Bao came into the kitchen, sat on the kitchen chair, looked at me, and he said, "Where there is justification, there is no repentance. And when there is no repentance, there is no forgiveness."
Say that again, Nick.
Where there is justification, there is no repentance. And if there's no repentance, there's no forgiveness.
Yeah, and then I guess by extension, where there's no forgiveness, there's no change.
Well,
You just
you know, when I thought of it first, even our criminal justice system, one of the things that judges look for is whether the person is repentant. If they admit that they made a mistake and they're sorry, very oftentimes the judges are very lenient. But if they don't, if they haven't learned their lesson, so to speak, they just, you know, or they, whatever it is, they get a very harsh punishment. So even our worldly system works that way, you know, and I think we just, uh, you know, the Mandali would always remind us that, you know, that Erich was fond of telling stories about the saints and how one was asked, let me see if I remember how this went. Now, there was one particular disciple who this master was very fond of. And when the others asked him why, he said, "You'll see." And later that day, it was in the middle of the afternoon, the master said, "Oh, it's gotten so dark in here." And this one disciple got up and lit a lamp. There was no question about what's not dark, it's light. He just did what would have been the natural thing to do if it was dark. In other words, what I got from it is, if Baba tells us to do something, we should do it without thinking. That's what how the Mandali worked, was this absolute obedience without putting our own thoughts in it. And some of these lessons are driven home. Matter of fact, on a little Alaba thing, which I'm reminded of now, embarrassing for me, but made me realize how I could not be with Baba then. I don't know that I could be with him now because how my mind works and how difficult it is to obey. So Alaba, when he was visiting, he agreed to give a talk at another Baba lover's house. It was Eddie Hauser. You know who Eddie Hauser is, up in Chapel Hill, Durham area. And Alaba was fond of having one Coca-Cola a day. That's what he would permit himself. So we arranged to give the meeting at Eddie's house. And I told Eddie, I said, "Eddie, have some Coca-Cola in the house. I don't know if he's going to want it, but if he wants it, that's what he'll ask for." So sure enough, we do the meeting. There's a break in the meeting. And I go over to him and I ask if there's anything he would like. And he said, yes. He said, Coca-Cola. He said, 4 ice cubes. I said, okay. And I go in the kitchen, get Eddie, go in the kitchen, get out the ice cube tray and the Coca-Cola. And the ice cubes were tiny. Now, the ice cubes that I had in my freezer were probably like 1-inch blocks. Isn't that what a usual ice cube looks like? These were not any bigger than thumb. It was like something you might put in a cocktail. Anyway, I look at these and I'm thinking 4 ice cubes, they're about half the size. So I put 8, thinking that's going to give me 4 ice cubes. And I bring it to Oliver, very proud of myself for having mastered this mathematic conundrum. And Oliver looks in the glass and he says, you can't count? A little simple thing about how the mind, he said, now it's not that he gave me an order that I had to follow, but it was a simple instruction: 4 ice cubes. That's all I had to do is put 4 ice cubes. If he didn't like the size of the ice cubes, he would have asked me for more. But I let my mind jump and try to figure out what he really meant. Like, next thing I would have gotten a scale and weighed them. And it's like if Papa gives you an order and you to have bread and water. Well, can you have toast? He said bread. I don't know. You want to go get French bread? Does a baguette count? I mean, this is kind of the way the mind works. And one of the reasons why I think it's just so difficult, and why the Mandali are few and far between.
One of them is latched and the other one isn't. Yeah.
The other story that I want to relay, because this is one that Bao also told me to relay as much as possible. Again, it has to do with obedience. So in those early days, there was no pilgrim centers at all. It wasn't built yet. So in the 70s, for those of us that went to India then, we would stay at Mehrabad. We could go Monday, and then we'd have to leave Friday, because the cooking was done just by village women, and people who went would be put up really in the quarters right there, where Baba's interview cabin, the Donkin's old cabin. So there weren't many. The first time I went, there were only 6 Westerners. So they were not, it wasn't crowded. But we, on the weekends, we would go to Pune, and we'd get on a bus on Friday. Was there 3 months that first time. Pardon me. And we'd stay with Jal. When I say stay with Jal, he would put us up in a hotel. And he would assign the hotel. Pardon me. He would take us to where we were to stay. And it didn't matter to us where we were, because we just wanted to be with him. That was my main concern, was just to spend time with him. And so he takes us to this particular hotel. I don't remember the name of it. It might, Jeff, you might know, and I don't know if it's still open. I think it was called the Green. But anyway, that doesn't matter.
The National too, yeah.
Yeah, no, this wasn't the National. We had stayed there, but for this particular episode, this time, what was unique about this hotel, it had a beautiful lobby, and it had a grand staircase. the downstairs was the lobby, had restaurants, things like that. Then it was this grand staircase with maybe 30 steps, and then the rooms on the first floor. So we go in with Jal. He's arranged for us to stay there. And he comes up to check the room and make sure everything is okay. And it's right at the head of the stairs. As you walk up the stairs, head on the left. So everything is fine. Now, Jal, what he would do in those days, and mind you, he was probably maybe in his 70s at that time. He would come to wherever we stayed. This was his habit. He would come to get us in the morning. We'd go have tea, breakfast. Then we'd wander around Pune. He would take us to the hospital where Baba was born. We'd go to the school. We'd go to the house, Baba house. And then and then we'd have lunch because the whole morning would be used up that way. And after lunch, and he would wait until we were in our room locked, and then he would go with arrangements to come back for tea and dinner. So he would 2 or 3 times, he was coming back and forth. And I presume he was seeing other Westerners, but I didn't run into anybody. But I know that he was Baba's emissary, which is a whole nother story, which we can get into if anybody's interested. So we get to this room. He's happy with the room. Now it's Friday afternoon because we've just gotten there by bus. This is our first night there, going to be there and then leave Sunday. So Friday, Saturday night. So now he tells us, now, when I leave, you lock the door and I will come back. I forget what time, 7, 8 o'clock, we'll go for dinner. He's now, when I come back, I will knock on the door and you will say, who is it? And I will say, Jai Baba. You will say Jai Baba, and only then unlock the door. Okay. So now we have our rest. We've unpacked. He comes for, as he said, to take us. We're going out to dinner. Knocks on the door. Jai Baba, Jai Baba. And we walk down. There's no elevator. We walk down. Now the next, he's that night when we go back, he walks back up the stairs and waits until we lock the door. Then he leaves. Now he's going to come back Saturday morning. We're going to go for breakfast. He's now the same routine. No, Jai Baba, you keep the door locked. So that's how Saturday passes. And now Sunday morning, and we're gonna take the bus back either Sunday, we might have gone back. I don't remember, Sunday, maybe Monday, doesn't matter. Anyway, he's the Saturday now because it's breakfast, lunch, tea, and dinner. So he's walked up and down these stairs 4 times. And now Sunday morning comes, and I said to my wife, let's go downstairs and meet John. She said, well, he said to wait here. I said, yeah, but look, he's an old man and he's walking up and down these stairs. We can meet him in the lobby. And how can that be terribly wrong? I thought I was doing something good. Yeah. So now it's about 5 minutes to 7 on Sunday morning. And he said he would be there at 7 a.m. And you could set your clock by him. He was very precise with his timing. So it's about 5 minutes to 7. I open the door to step out, and here's Jal just putting his foot on the top step. He looks at me with this look of utter disappointment. And he says, where are you going? I said, well, we were going to come downstairs to meet you. He said, what did I tell you? To wait until you say. Yes. He said, you don't understand. You are my responsibility. If anything were to happen to you, Baba wouldn't be happy. He made us go back inside, lock the door. He walked back downstairs, came back upstairs, knocked on the door. I looked at my watch. It was exactly 7. That was the only time he came early. His sense of responsibility. That's what Bao, when I told Bao about that, when I told him that story, because he would ask me, because he had very little contact with John. But he would ask me to tell him stories about John. And when I told him that, he said that because for those who spent time with Bao, whenever anybody would ask, well, what about obedience to Baba now? We don't have orders. Bao would ask somebody to bring out the little list that's got my wish. And I believe the first thing on the wish list is to fulfill your responsibilities. So here was Jal fulfilling his responsibilities. And that lesson for me, I took very seriously. If Baba hands you a job to do, whether it's family, business, your wife, your own health, whatever it is, you have to fulfill that responsibility. You can't just walk away from it. Erich would tell me, he said, Baba, when he gives you something, don't throw it away. Wait till if it's taken from you, that's okay.
Nick, have you got any exchanges with Erich that you recall?
Yeah. Erich was how to probably the most influential of my life of all the Mandali. He was. I saw a light, humorous side with Erich. I was one day I was laying on one of those concrete benches at Marizon after lunch. I had a copy of God Speaks. I was young. I was foolish. I had a copy of God Speaks. I was using it as a pillow under my head. I mean, disrespectful. Erich came along. He said, "You need help getting that into your head." I was laying on my side. He turned around and sat on me and jumped up and down while he was sitting on me. He said, "Now we'll force it into your head." He when my very first trip to India, I stayed on the center. I in those days when I found out about Bob in the '60s, he was still in the body. I didn't know that he had dropped the body in '69. I went to the center the spring of '69 to find everybody going to, the well, aren't you going to India? I didn't know Baba had dropped the body. No idea. I didn't. There was nobody that told me about Baba. I opened the business, and when I went in that business, there was a little photo of Baba, and that was so. There was nobody that introduced me to Baba. That was Baba introduced himself to me, and so yeah, Erich. God, there are so many things. It's hard to know where to begin. Erich told me one time I was walking with him. I was impertinent. I was very impertinent. I was young. I was immature. But the Mandali were always kind and generous and responsive. I would ask the most ridiculous questions, and they would answer them. I was walking with Erich one time, and I said to him, Erich, how come you're not happy? Can you imagine? Asking Erich why he's not happy. He's been with Bob his whole life, and Right, right. You're entitled to laugh. I laugh at myself now for that. However, this was the outcome of it. He said, "Why do you ask that?" I said, "Erich, I never see you smile." And you know, for those of you who spend time with Erich, Erich was not a smiley person. It wasn't that he was sad looking. He had a very even temperament, I would say. He was he was just an even temperament. Um, he said, "Brother," he said, "real happiness is not a smile." He said, "Real happiness is inside." Then he said to me, "The day will come when you will welcome suffering." He said, "Don't invite it, but when it comes, you will welcome it." Now, at the time, I was happily married. I had a successful business. I had a pocket full of money. I was in India. I, what suffering? I had great health. I have always been very strong. So what kind of suffering? And I forgot about it over the years. Must have been 35 years later when I was going through intense suffering. And I was calling out to Baba. And this particular time, it was so monumental for me. I was stopped at a traffic light at 10 o'clock in the morning on my way to open my business. And I'm crying and calling out to Baba. But I called out in a voice that I did not recognize. It was a voice that came from so deep within me, it was not my own voice. The minute that happened, I saw Baba sitting on the seat right in the car next to me. And I realized that all of my remembrance of Baba prior to that was here. It wasn't in the heart. It was here. It was mental. Oh, Baba, Baba, Baba. Well, I was watching TV, having dinner. But I was happy because I was saying Baba's name. But when I called out to him from the depths of that suffering, I realized that I called out in a different voice. And he stayed with me for about 2 weeks. And as the suffering abated, and I went back to remembering him mentally, his physical presence was gone. And the truth of what Erich had told me really struck home. That after that, I began to look, not to invite it, but to welcome suffering when it came. Because when that happens, that's when we have the chance to call out to him deep within us. As a little aside, Fred Winterfeld, for those of you who didn't know him, Fred was one of the original caretakers at the center, sent there by Baba's order. Fred Winterfeld, wonderful, wonderful man. He said to me one time, he said, the spiritual journey is from here to here. He didn't explain anything, and I didn't ask at the time, but now I've come to believe that we can hear about Baba, we can read about Baba, we can repeat Baba's name, we can sing Baba's song, but it's all, if it's up here, it's we don't own it yet. It has to come, it has to percolate down. And for some people, maybe that happens immediately. And for some of us, it may take many, many lifetimes. But it has to come down to it where it's in our heart. And now, and I've had a fair share of suffering this last couple of years. And it's very easy for me now because, as Eric said, I just go, okay, Baba, where are you? Now, oh, there you are. Because now I know that I can tap that voice. I still, it's not that I do it all day, every day. I don't claim anything that anybody else cannot do. It's just that it's the end product of remembering him. You know? It's sort of like, I spend a lot of time in Italy. I can listen to all the Italian music. I don't understand it. I enjoy it. I like the rhythm. I like, but I don't understand it because I don't speak the language. So, but when I get a chance to understand it, then it means something. The other wonderful story with Erich, that first stayed at the center for 2 weeks before going off to India, and watched films. I'd never even seen films of Baba before. I mean, I didn't belong to any Baba group in Florida. It was nothing. So I knew a few people who knew about Baba, but we didn't have films. We didn't have books. In those days, there were only 4 or 5 books available. I couldn't afford a copy of God Speaks. I couldn't. Anyway, so I'm at the center watching films, very hunger to see films. And here's Baba handing prasad to people. And Marshall Hay is explaining that that's what it is. Now, when people went to see Baba, Baba would give them either a piece of fruit or some grapes or candy or something. And he explained that that's the tradition in the East, is that when the master gives you something from his hand, that's prasad. So off I go to India, and I go in the samadhi for the very first time. And when I come out, he's Mansari, Baba's little nun who is there. This 4 foot nothing little lady who lived there her whole life. And he's just wonderful. He was the only one of the few. There were only two, maybe 3, 4 people that were allowed to live permanently after the new life at Upper Mehrabad, and that was Mansari and Kaikobad and his daughters, wife and daughters. Nobody else was permitted to live up there. So I come out of the samadhi, and Mansari hands me a couple little orange candies. And I said, "What's this?" And she says, "Prasad. You eat it." Okay. Well, as I thought about it afterwards, I thought, it's not from Baba's hand. Why is she telling me this is prasad? So one of my next day or 2 days later, I'm with Eric. He would walk every day down the road, and I'd walk with him a lot. And he would have a habit, as several of the Mandalay did. He would say, "What's on your mind? Something's troubling you." And I said, Eric. And I explained to him. I said, why is this lady giving out candy and then saying it's prasad? It's not from Baba's hand. Narish took a breath, looked around. He said, "Brother," he said, "the very air you breathe is prasad if you take it that
Say that again, Nick.
way. The very air you breathe is prasad if you take it that way."
Beautiful. Mm.
Wow.
Nick, I think you've gotten frozen. Can you move a little bit? Uh-oh. I think he went into samadhi here. Uh-oh, and he's not real, he's not a techie, actually. Although, Nick, you can probably hear us, but Where did he go?
Hopefully he went off and will come back.
We'll see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me check here. No. Anybody have a little story to share? Oh, Mayor Prasad, do you have that one quote about the highest form of love that
Yes, I need to find it though.
so this is a very rare quote of Boba's.
I have a question.
Yes.
Nick said, real happiness is, and then we didn't hear the word. Does anybody remember what it was?
I think he said real happiness is within.
Ah,
It's not
within.
It's not the kind of something on the surface. It's a deeper, deep within.
Yeah, it was so softly said. It was tough to hear.
Ah, yeah. Well, I asked him to, say it again. But I like that where he says, "The very air you breathe is His prasad." If you take it that way, and that can be for anything, Oh, here's Nick calling me on the phone. Yes, Nick.
Yes, my computer died.
Uh-oh, died?
I have no idea why. It's blank screen. I can't get anything to come back on.
Did you run out of power?
It was at 100% when I started the meeting.
Uh-huh.
I'm just rebooting it and see what's going on.
Yeah.
I've rebooted it twice, but it wouldn't start.
Uh-oh. Well,
Anyway.
it's kind of after it was about 11:15 or something like that, which is
Yeah.
a good time for the people here on the East Coast. Because some of them have to actually go to work tomorrow. I mean, you and I are, well, I actually
Yeah,
still
well-
work, but I'm.
Yeah. Anyway, I was really calling to ask you to apologize for me.
Yeah. Oh, well, they loved it. Thank you so much. Beautiful sharing, and we'll get you next time when your computer is runs for more than 1 hour.
Yeah, actually, it's timely because Marie and her boyfriend is a computer genius, and I told him that's what I want for Christmas is for him to fiddle with my computer and tell me what's going on with it.
Okay.
So,
Well,
putting him right to work.
Well,
Thank everybody.
yeah.
I enjoyed it very, very much, and
Yeah.
I look forward to.
Yeah.
I appreciate the opportunity to share.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Much love. Yep. Nick.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Jay Baba.
Baba bless. Jay
Yeah.
Baba.
Hey, so Mayor Prasad, did you find that quote?
Yeah, I did.
This is a very interesting quote.
Okay. Amidst intense activity, if there is absolute calmness of mind, that is the highest love. Amidst intense activity, if there is absolute calmness of mind, that is the highest love.
It reminds me of during World War II. Well, Delia de Leon was one of the women Mandalay there in England, and she was a classic worrywart. I mean, she was a real worrier. And during World War II, when London was being bombarded, Baba sent a message to her. I don't know if the exact words, but he said, "Remain calm. If you remain calm, I can work through you." Can you imagine sending that to someone who's like an inveterate worrier? But because when the mind is calm, the love that is at the heart of us can flow through unobstructed. Baba's love can, it doesn't have to go through a disturbed mind and heart. It flows through freely. But so let's see. Um, I guess why don't we have a few moments of silence? And for the next couple of weeks, because it's the holidays, we'll probably won't be back until maybe something like January 8th. But I will be in touch with you.
Very nice.
And yeah.
Jeff,
Yes.
you say, Bobby, is the very air that we breathe. I like the way Narina says, he is the very life that we breathe. We need not see one another as separate things. We see one, and that is he. We live in one all-I life, in joining order, in use, in mind that is surrendered. I somehow I love that.
Yeah, beautiful. Hey, well, let's have a few moments of silence, and then if Nasreen is still here, yep, she is. She will send us on our way into the holidays.
Okay,
Wait, but first we'll have a few moments of silence, and then
sure.
okay. Jai Baba.
Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Avatar Meher Baba Ki Jai.
Baba Ki Jai, Avatar Meher Baba.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Hey,
Jai
does
Baba.
anyone have any question or anything, or any small change? Well, I hope you have nice holidays, and
I have a quick question.
yeah.
It's totally personal. I need to ask you a question. Should I text you, WhatsApp you, or email you?
Either way, whatever medium you want to take. Is it so? It's a personal one, huh?
Well, it has something to do with us coming.
Oh.
So I'll text you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll be. Yeah.
Can you ask Baba to warm it up too in Myrtle Beach for next weekend?
I know. Oh, I know. What date are you coming?
We're coming Friday night.
Oh my God. I know. I think it's going to be down to 22 degrees. Coming from LA. Yeah. Do you? And you probably don't have any kind of clothes.
Thank
Purpose,
you.
right?
We're not pathetic. We'll bring layers.
Yeah.
Just put on everything you have.
Yeah.
Layer it.
Go in layers.
Layer it.
Yeah. Put your blanket over you.
I have some of these like thermal things that are really
Yeah.
yeah. But yeah, of all the times, we rarely have weather that cold, and we've had pretty mild winter so far. And you know, Bob just timed it for you to freeze.
Good. And I do have a question. How many people can stay at the center?
I mean, if every bed was occupied, it would be about 80.
Ah.
But you know, not every, you know, you have a cabin that has 5 beds and maybe 3 people are in that cabin. So there's some empty beds here and there.
Right.
Now, normally it's really packed during the holidays, but because of COVID and its restrictions, we're we're not as so full at, you know, we're not anywhere near the capacity.
Oh, I thought it was sold out.
Well, it's what it is. They put a day between cabins. It used to be bumper to bumper. You know, as soon as it's out, the bed is still warm and a new person comes in. But here we're leaving space a day between arrivals, so that means we're losing our capacity, you might say. Yeah.
I have to say, as an ex-Californian, when it's cold here, it's like, it just gets you. You know, for me, it's like I never got used to it. I have a down coat. I use it here when it gets that cold.
I mean, even people from New England feel the cold here because it's a damp cold.
Damp
It
cold.
really goes through you, yeah.
Right.
Hey, well, let's see. Yeah, hey, there's Muncie. I see she's in there, but we don't get to see her. Sanober is here. These people tuning in from England.
Yeah.
I mean, England, India. Yeah. So anyway, I guess, and Emmy, I hope she's doing okay. Anthony. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff. She's doing great.
Yeah.
Thank you for this. This is great tonight.
Folks, when you were here, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, we miss you so much too. We're so happy we got to spend time with Nan and went to the Cracker Barrel with Denny.
Yeah. Denny was just here, you know, a little while ago. He came. He was.
He's great. We had so much fun. Hopefully, see you soon.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm gonna.
Whoa, he's out.